3 outcomes.
Okay, well, doctor, you were here in that exact same chair giving testimony in a proceeding, correct?
Yes.
And you were sworn in.
Correct.
And in response to a question, because I'm just using your own words, and correct me if this doesn't sound right, or if this doesn't reflect your recollection. You said in response to a question, yeah, it's never changed, and that's what's interesting. It's always been what I would call a delusion, but that her mom would have killed her. And Nicole saw it as 3 choices. Those were your words, 3 choices. She could kill herself, which she considered doing. So she thought about it. So she had a logical thought process. And at one point said she could, sort of chickened out, I think was the word she used. So she could kill herself, she could be killed by her mother, or she could kill her mother. Those were your words, correct, doctor?
I don't know if I said part of what you just said, but if you look further in... Okay, that's fine. Why don't you bring it to me? That would be good. But I also want to say that I do later on say outcomes is the correct one, so I'll find that for you. Yeah, so I have here, and I'm not, you added, I think, something. I said she saw it as 3 choices, and I did say she chickened out, but then I do, and if you'll give me a moment, I may have to look at mine. Transcript, but I do come back and say it's more in terms of outcomes.
Okay, well, you can find that.
Right. Okay, well, then, because it's an important distinction, and I corrected myself. So.
But at that point in time, though, you indicated she had 3 choices, and rather than choose suicide, because you said she thought about it and she chickened out, so she made a logical decision. I'm not going to kill myself. I'm going to kill my mom.
No, I disagree, Counselor.
Right,
and if you'll give me a moment, and I think I'm entitled that to show you where I did correct that.
Doctor,
Am I not allowed to do that, Judge?
Well, I'll allow redirect.
Okay, because I know I have that in there where I corrected myself on outcomes.
Either
I understand, Doctor, you want to, but I'm trying to move this. I'm sorry, Judge.
Or give her the opportunity on redirect.
I will. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just trying to move this along, Doctor.
Right.
So,
I understand.
And you also indicated that the mother provided food, clothing, and shelter for Ms. Nachtman as she was growing up, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And the physical abuse you described, you would agree is limited. I think you've said that very many times.
I would agree.
And I'm sure most cases you see the physical abuse is far worse, or at least in these type of cases.
That is correct.
All right. In fact, Doctor, in your report, referring specifically to page 35, you state on the bottom of 35 that the term battered child typically is used in the legal form in reference to a child who has endured extreme physical and or sexual abuse, correct? That's what you wrote in your report?
Yeah, that's usually how it's viewed, Counselor.
Correct. And then on page 36, you indicated as well that the acts reportedly perpetrated by Mrs. Steens, however, pale in comparison to the magnitude of physical abuse I have documented in many cases of parasite offenders. If these physically abusive acts were the only ones to which Nicole had been subjected, I would not characterize as a battered child. So as far as the physical abuse, it did not rise to the level of battered child.
I don't think one would make that determination simply on one aspect of that. So you've got to consider the others.
Doctor. You've explained that there were other factors, the physical or the emotional abuse, the psychological abuse. I'm just saying, as far as the physical abuse goes, it's so limited that you would not consider that particularly on its own to be battered child syndrome.
If that was it, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And the limited physical abuse you noted is all self-reported from Ms. Nachtman, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
There's no police reports of any prior violence or any abuse to her, correct?
Not with respect to Nicole.
And there's no statements from any witnesses who observed any physical abuse to Nicole?
That is correct.
Okay. And there's no hospital records, statements from witnesses of bruising, etc., nothing like that?
That is correct.
And in all that self-reporting, does she ever say that her mom threatened to kill her in the past?
No, Nicole never made that representation that her mother in the past said that. That's correct.
And the stepfather, Mr. Deans, Robert Deans, there's no evidence whatsoever that he had physically abused her in any manner, correct?
That is correct.
And you would agree with me then also that Ms. Nachtman is an intelligent individual with at least average or above average intelligence, correct?
I would agree with that.
All right, and I mean, obviously, in order to get into Florida State University, she had to make the grades, she had to pass the courses and do enough to get into college, correct?
I would agree with that.
Now, early on, you indicated that there was reports of child abuse allegations, and that was between Miriam Deans and Robert Deans, right? They were both accusing each other of the various incidences of child abuse from the
You
family.
mean Ron Nachtman? Is
I'm
that
sorry,
correct?
Ron Nachtman. I said Robert Deans. You're correct, Ron Nachtman.
Yeah, so I'm talking to, when I said there was acrimony and abuse allegations, the mother was making them against the biological father, and the father was making them against the mother, the biological father. So her parents were making allegations against each other. That is correct.
And that was back when she was 3 years old, correct?
About that, I'd have to check, but in that period.
All right. And the physical abuse that you mentioned, the kicking, the slapping, things of that nature, none of that would rise to the level of criminal child abuse in the state of Florida, correct?
That I can't answer because I'm not an attorney. Now, I can only tell you what you represented, beating and kicking. I don't know as a state attorney if you would charge that. As a clinician, I consider that very serious.
All right. Well, in under Florida law...
Judge, I'm going to object. That's outside this witness's expertise, what Florida law on whether someone's going to be arrested or not.
I'll sustain.
Judge, we approach?
Yes.
Doctor, you've given your, earlier talking about the physical abuse. Under the child abuse, and I'm going to ask you if you are familiar with this or if you know this, that under the law in the state of Florida, it's not a crime for a parent of a child to impose reasonable physical discipline on a child for misbehavior under the circumstances, even though physical injury resulted from the discipline. Were you aware of that?
I haven't read the statute in a long time, that's true, but where we're maybe disagreeing is on what is reasonable.
Okay. One of the things you said you reviewed were the jail medical records of Nicole Nachtman, correct?
That is correct.
And the jail medical records show no indication of any diagnosis for any psychotic illness, isn't that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And at the jail, they have doctors, they have people who see the patient, see the people in jail and take care of them, correct?
That is correct.
And she's not being treated or being treated, she has not been treated or is being treated currently for any psychotic illness, correct?
That is correct. She is not being treated. She doesn't want treatment, and she's doing okay in a contained environment.
And she is currently not taking any medication for any psychotic illness, correct?
That is correct.
You talked about the seeing signs, and specifically you mentioned the signs about you're on the right, or your goals are almost met, or something like that, which she took as affirmation. And that came from Joseph Carey, correct? Or did she tell you
I
that
think
herself?
she said it to me as well.
Well, when she
I mean, I
says
can look through my notes if you want, that's not a problem, I have them.
well, doctor, you're familiar with her path of travel during those 3 days, correct?
I believe I am, yes.
Yes, and it's your understanding and belief that she stayed in Tampa until the 21st, until after the murders, before she drove up to Tallahassee.
That is clearly my understanding and her representation from the beginning.
All right. But she, according to Joseph Carey, what she told him was she drove up to Tallahassee where she saw the signs and then drove back down to finish the job. So that was not true what she told him, was it?
That was his, I don't know, you know, if that's what she said. That was clearly Joseph's or Joey's understanding. Nicole said to me that that was inaccurate. So that's all I can tell you on that, counselor.
Okay. With regards to where you were indicating that going through Nicole Nachtman's childlike character and that her inability to function because she still was functioning in a childlike capacity, correct? You were discussing that earlier, correct?
Her perceptions are those of a child, are more childlike, yes.
And it was
correct.
it was your opinion, doctor, that she would not be able to function in college in that capacity because of her childlike ability.
Well, when I saw her, she was very impaired, and so it was clearly very difficult. And when I saw her, remember, she's in that severe state of mental decompensation. So I could not imagine, and I've never seen a student functioning like that successfully in college.
Well, let me ask you, can a person with the mentality that you're kind of describing doctor a transcript with Photoshop in order to mislead the mother?
Yeah, and again, counselor, this is very important, and I really appreciate the question. There is a difference between personality development and intelligence. And I'm not saying that Nicole was not intelligent. I'm saying that her way of perceiving the world and thinking is like a child not wanting to get into trouble. Now let me use a quick example because this will make it clearer. And I think it's important. I just want them to understand.
You've answered my question. We need to move along, so I'm trying to just move this along.
But right? I also want the jury to understand.
I think you've explained it. I don't think we need an example at this moment. So I'm asking about the child, and she was able to get us. You would agree that Nicole Nachtman was able to get a storage unit on her own, correct? She did get a storage unit. I don't know if she had help or not. That I'm under oath. I can't tell you that if her friends, because I know Angelica Henwood said something about, I thought, helping her, but I know she had a storage unit. Okay. And she was able to travel to London on her own? And live on her own in London for an entire semester,
there again,
correct?
Counselor, I honestly don't know. She did go to London and she lived there. How her travel arrangements were made, I don't know. So
well, you would agree, doctor, that in order to travel to London, you have to get your passport, you have to go through customs, you have to go get your airline, you have to make your exchange at the airport, you have to go fly in, and then you're in a foreign country, you have to learn how to get to your hotel, how to manage your food, how to eat, how to drink. Basically, she did all that for a semester abroad. And you would agree she did that, correct?
No, I would not. What I want to just take exception, she may have done that. I'm only saying, I don't know. I would be surprised if she made all her travel arrangements from everything I've heard. I just don't see that happening. I think her mother would have been involved in that. Usually schools, when they go and you study abroad, you just don't go on your own. There are provisions made. There are dorm rooms booked. So you're making a lot of assumptions. You could be correct, but my experience says that that doesn't fit with the person I know and my experience as a college professor, that you just willy-nilly send these kids over to London and they fend for themselves. That has not been my experience, counselor.
All right, but you've not heard anything from anyone that there were any problems with her trip to London, that she had trouble meeting her plane, making her connection, getting through customs, getting her luggage there, any problems with any hygiene while she was in London, any problems getting her food, getting fed, doing what she needed to do, her classes, getting to her classes, her grades were good then. There's no indication of any problems with her in London for that time period, correct?
I can't agree with that totally. She did tell me that she wasn't eating properly, she didn't have a food plan, so she'd go on occasion to get free food, she'd go to Subway, so she wasn't eating real good meals. She did tell me she showered, and she also told me she felt the sense of freedom there. But typically, in a situation like that, when you're abroad, there's going to be a containment for college students, so they are successful. There's going to be some structured counselor, is what I'm saying.
Well, and then let me get closer to the time in question here. She was able to fill out a housing application on her own, which apparently she's been doing for a while because her mom, according to the testimony we've heard, never came up to help her move in, so she was able to get to class or get to school on her own, move in on her own. When it came to the housing application, granted, she was late, so that was the problem, and that's obviously the impetus for the whole thing.
Judge, I'm going to object to the form of the question. I think it's 3 in 1.
Let's break it up.
I'll bring it down to one thing. She was able to take care of that situation, the mess she had created for herself, get the housing application in, filled out, get it approved, communicate with Florida State, get the money to Florida State, scan in.
Form of the question.
Judge, I'm going through the list of things she did, and I'm asking her if she was able to do all of that.
Well, it's compound if you want.
All right, I'll go through each thing, but that's going to take a while. So she was able to get the housing application she needed, correct?
You're talking about subsequently?
Correct.
I would think so, yes. The evidence suggests she borrowed the money and apparently got the room.
Correct. And she filled out the application, she got it in, she scanned it, however, she emailed it, correct? You've seen
As far as
emails.
I know, I haven't seen it, but she did get the room. I'll agree with that, yes.
The things that she said her mom said to her, specifically the overweight, skank, retard, those things were again self-reported, correct?
That is correct. I don't think I heard anybody say they heard that language directed towards Nicole. They heard language like that in reference to them, but not to Nicole.
Now you mentioned earlier that, and it was, I hadn't heard it before, but that she attempted suicide with pills. Is there any evidence of that other than what she told you? I mean, is there any evidence of a Baker Act, a hospital stay, anything that there was medical intervention needed?
I did not see anything. That is self-reported.
Okay, so that is a self-reported. Now, also earlier, doctor, you were kind of describing her sudden grade drop, and you seem to constantly equate irresponsibility with drinking or smoking, and that's usually or is the reason why people's grades drop and they fail to succeed in college. But there's other types of irresponsibility that causes grades to drop. Would you agree?
There could be.
Someone could just plain be lazy and not want to go to classes and do the work that needs to be done. Would that be accurate?
I would agree. That could certainly happen.
And someone could just be, you talk about drinking and smoking, someone could just be, as you claim she may be, addicted to her computer, enjoying her computer, wanting to be in that world, wanting to type and not doing her classes, but rather would stay on the computer. That could be a reason why her grades were dropping as well, correct?
Well, I would agree that that's what happened. The flight into fantasy, yes.
Correct. Now, you administered 2 tests that she got some high scores on to support a diagnosis of PTSD, the trauma symptom inventory and the dissociative experience scale. Now, both of those tests, they're both self-report instruments, correct?
That's correct.
And so Nicole could magnify those, correct?
That's why I discussed the validity scores. I had 8 of them, and what they showed is that she was not what's called faking good or faking bad. They were accurate. Now those were with respect to the TSI-2. That's very important because you want to know that they're reporting accurately. So the test builds that in. Now the DES, the dissociative experiences scale, does not have a validity score built in. However, this is important, her results were completely consistent with the trauma symptom inventory results. They were consistent with what the school had reported, what was in the school records. They were consistent with what she had reported. They were consistent with what her college friends had reported and what the family had reported in terms of the dissociation. So you always want to look for that corroborative data.
I understand. Now, doctor, as part of the material you looked at, did you ever get the email exchanges, or I'm sorry, text message exchanges that took place on Nicole Nachtman's phone? Did you ever review those?
I saw some, I think. I'm not sure. If you could tell me what you're referring to.
Well, specifically, doctor, I'm referring to all of them because there's a number of exchanges between the defendant in this case and the mother, Miriam Deans, and I wonder if you had a chance to review those exchanges between them and if you have any opinion about that.
I'm not sure which ones. When you say extensive, I did see some right around the time of the shootings with the mom appeared to me be checking in. I don't think I saw extensive email contacts between the mother. I think I saw a few. That's my recollection, counselor. And that would have been around the time of the incident.
Now, I'm going to just point out a few of these and ask if it agrees with your opinion of Nicole Nachtman and the relationship she has with Miriam Deans. And so I'll, and again, doctor, if you tell me if you remember these, because I don't see anywhere in your list of stuff that you had reviewed that you had said you reviewed these. Specifically going to the top of page 379 is a text received from Nicole from Miriam Deans, her mom. And it says, "Sorry, honey, we'll get it to your bank tonight." And then down here on the bottom is the response from Nicole Nachtman, "No worries." And then she also sends, because everything that says sent went from her phone, she says, "No worries, take your time, just mainly no, low, nothing serious." And then the response back from Miriam Deans, "Money in the bank, let me know you got it, and let me know if there's more problems with the roommate." You see those?
Yes.
Did you review these texts?
I had not seen those.
And on page 392, again, text between Nicole Nachtman and Miriam Deans. And then here's where she says, "No, that is just when classes end." And then the response from Miriam Deans, "No seats on Saturday, just checked." And then the response from Nicole, "Just let me drive down." And her response, "I said no. Bob says the car needs maintenance, so besides safety, I don't want you stranded." You review those in the course of your
No, but
evaluation.
are those in reference to the spring break? Is that what it's about? I had not seen those.
No, it appears that she's trying to get down and her mom is concerned for her safety in driving the vehicle, correct?
With a little bit that I saw, that's the inference I would make, and it seems like it's around spring break. I'm just trying to put a context in, counselor, so I can understand it. That's
Well, I just asking if you reviewed it. Do those
No, I
texts,
did not see those.
do those texts sound like the mother you've been describing and the relationship that you've been describing of a woman who's scared of her mother to death and a woman who has a horrible relationship with her mother, and a mother who doesn't care about her daughter? Or does it sound...
Objection to the form of the question?
Well, rephrase, but first put the exhibit number on the
Yes.
record, please.
Sorry, Your Honor, that was State's Exhibit number 70.
Okay, go ahead and rephrase the question.
Judge, I'll move on.
I can respond to the question.
It's okay. Let's move ahead to the murders in this case, both of Robert Deans and Miriam Deans. Actually, let's go specifically to the murder of Miriam Deans, because that's where your testimony regarding battered child syndrome applies. As far as her, it only applies to her case. Correct? You understand that?
I do. I understand that's a court ruling.
Right. So, and it applies to the self-defense instruction. And are you aware of the self-defense instruction?
I'm aware of the self-defense instruction in general. I think I know Florida law, but I haven't looked at it in a while.
Now, I want to go specifically to what Ms. Nachtman told you about the moments before she shot her mother. Can you go through that, what she told you about that?
Yes. What she said was that she was just trying to decide basically what to do. She was thinking of, and I want to go back to that time, so that's why I'm pausing.
Just if you can, just to the point where she decides to leave the house when her mom comes in, she chickens out or whatever and goes out the window. Describe what Nicole described to you, how the actions occur.
All right, Counselor, I'll answer your question,
Okay.
but I want the moment to think about it because it's
That's fine.
important to recollect my thoughts.
Absolutely, you can have that.
Thank
sure.
you. All right, so what she told me was that she's trying to basically, she's in this state of panic. She talks about, should she tell her mom, and she's kind of thinking that she'd tell her mom, and her mom, she somehow thinks that her mother can fix this. And that she's saying, well, she'd tell her mom, and what she's concerned about, as she says, is that her mom will, I use the word coup, but will say to her, sweetie, you can tell me anything. And then she said, I'll tell her what happened. And then she uses the expression, I'll sing like a canary. And then mom will take the gun if she has it. No, she'll talk me out of the gun, and then she'll shoot me. So she's trying to decide, should she take mom in? She's wrestling with, she says at one point, if mom can't keep a secret, and she's talking now about the iPad, and she's saying, like, if mom couldn't help me with something like that, can I trust her to help me with something like this? And she's talking about the death of Bob.
All right, Doctor, let me maybe I misstated my question. I guess.
I thought you wanted to know what she was thinking, Counselor.
No, not what she was. No, not what she was thinking. That's why I said I must have misstated. So forgive me. Let me rephrase it, okay, so I can say it exactly right. At the moment before she killed her mom, describe the actions that were taking place, what she observed, what she decided to do at the moment she decided to do it, what her mom was doing. I want to hear that at the moment she shot her.
All right, well, what I was saying was relevant, at least in my thinking, because it talks about what she's doing. So she's having this kind of thinking process with herself. Then she's surprised. It's like her mother, she hears her mother in the house. That's what she reports. And it kind of caught her off guard because she didn't expect the mother. And she panics because now it's that moment where she could talk her mother in or whatever. And she says she panics and she goes out her, I believe it's her bedroom window. And she runs, she takes the gun because she's afraid that her mother, as she reports, will shoot her. She runs to what I presume is the front of the house where the driveway is. She runs unexpectedly into the mother. Apparently the door of the house is open. Her mother may have been in, but she runs into the mother. The mother says, reportedly again, excuse my language, what the fuck are you doing here? And Nicole said, and she shot her. And I think she said her mother screamed or yelled or both, and she shot her again. And a total, I believe, of 3 times. So that's what she reported to me.
All right, thank you, Doctor. And so she never indicated to you that the mother made any aggressive actions towards her, in any sort of movements towards her, in any way physical?
She did not report that her mother in any way was physically aggressive. She was verbally aggressive, but that's nothing physically aggressive.
And so she reported no physical assault or any aggressive movement towards her at the moment she shot her mother?
That's my understanding.
And Doctor, I believe you and I might have a little difference on this, but I want to go straight to what you stated to me back on January 9th of this year, of 2019, almost a little over, well, almost 4 years since the murder, in which I asked you, and this was a hearing regarding the battered child syndrome. And at one point in the hearing, because your report does not indicate that you made any sort of a diagnosis of insanity, does it?
No, I wasn't. I don't recall being asked to do that, but I did not make a diagnosis of insanity in the report.
Okay. And at one point in the proceedings, when I'm talking to you and you're giving me a description of her schizotypal personality disorder, and I'm going to read these lines to you and your responses, and then we'll get into that. But I asked you, and this was a question from me, but doctor, you are not opining, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've read your report. You are not opining that she did not know what she was doing at the time, and she did not know right from wrong. And you responded, that's correct, I'm not opining that. And then I said, so she would not fit under the McNaughton standard of insanity, correct? And you said, that is correct.
Yes, and then I said in reviewing the jury instructions, which I've done subsequently, that's where I saw Ori's consequences. And that's why I have come up with a different conclusion. In my report, and I can point to it in several places, I do talk about not knowing the seriousness or appreciating the consequences. So that is why there appears to be a change. You were on McNaughton, and that's what I answered, and the jury instructions are broader than that. And your question, Counselor, specifically says right from wrong, and I have the page number 2.
Doctor, I've heard it, but let me ask you this, okay? You've now told the court, or the jury, the McNaughton standard, but it's true, in fact, that Florida, in these instructions, were based on the McNaughton rule, correct?
Absolutely, I agree with that.
And citing to a Supreme Court of Florida case, and I'll give you the case site for you so you're aware of it. Patton v. State, 878 Southern 2nd, 368, a Supreme Court of Florida case from 2004. And this is from the Supreme Court, in which they stated, the legal test for insanity in Florida in criminal cases has long been the McNaughton rule.
Judge, is there a question?
I'm going to read this to her, Judge, and ask her if this is what she understands the law to be.
He's now Judge, can we approve?
Yeah.
So Dr. Heidi, I'm going to go ahead and show you this case, and specifically head note 7. And I'm asking you to read that paragraph right there.
Mm-hmm. You just want me to read those like 2 or 3 sentences, or the whole paragraph?
Just that paragraph.
Oh, all right, hold on. Okay.
All right. Doctor, does that paragraph explain what the McNaughton rule is in Florida?
Yes, but that's not how you phrased it to me, Mr. Terry.
All right, but it does, doesn't it? And according to the Supreme Court of Florida, the McNaughton rule states consequences in it, does it not?
Right, but that's not what you asked me, sir. And I went by your representation, and often the McNaughton rule doesn't have or its consequences in the first prong. So that's
the
what I'm
McNaughton
saying.
rule changes?
No, but the point is that, and again, I'm not saying that it changes, but oftentimes it's phrased as didn't know what you were doing, or if you didn't, or you did know that you did know it was wrong. So I have seen it represented that way. That is my understanding of it, or my recollection, let me put it that way. The way you said it to me, and if you look at what you said, was abbreviated, which is what I just referenced to you, did not know the nature of what they were doing, or it was wrong. And I agreed on that premise. The only thing we're having a distinction now is you are inserting based on the Supreme Court or its consequences. That's what the jury said, and that is not what you asked me. I put in my report consequences. So that's what I'm making reference to.
Doctor, I said the McNaughton standard, correct?
You did, sir.
All right.
But you
And
didn't
which
state
followed
it
in
correctly then, if that was your understanding of it. That's my point.
Have you ever been hired as an expert on insanity in the state of Florida?
Yes.
Right. So when I was asking you those questions, you didn't ask me, well, are you referring to Florida insanity, McNaughton standard that's different, that doesn't say consequences? You didn't ask me none of that.
I went by what you said, counselor, and what you specifically said was she didn't know what she was doing or it was wrong. And that's what I answered. You said under the McNaughton, I assumed you were quoting it correctly, and so that's what I went with.
And according to that Supreme Court decision, McNaughton states consequences,
Asked
correct?
and answered?
Right. And
Correct.
I answered.
Objection, asked and
Let's
answered?
move on.
So let's get into that statement here, Doctor. You indicated she had a mental infirmity, disease, or defect, and because of the condition, she did not know what she was doing, and you said no, she knew what she was doing. She knew she was shooting people, correct?
I think she knew that she had a gun and that she was shooting them, yeah.
Okay. And then your quibble is with the consequences word. What is the immediate consequences of shooting a person?
Well, normally, you would think with a rational person that shooting somebody would lead to physical harm, possibly serious injury or death. When I was looking at consequences, when I got the reviewing the jury standard or the jury instructions, I was also considering, did she consider the seriousness of this offense, appreciate it? And that's why I said, if I take into consequences, and I already testified, she had no understanding of how serious this was, and for almost 2 years, she kept thinking that her mom, in fact even longer than that, could influence the outcome, which kind of leaves me wondering, again, did she quite get, her mother was dead, and it was, I have it right in my notes, and it's in the report, when she finally said, my mother is dead, but still kind of thought her mother somehow could impact the outcome. So that makes me kind of think, does she really get this whole thing about consequences?
So, Doctor, you're extending the word consequences from the immediate action. So the action of doing, the shooting, The consequences of shooting someone are what, doctor? Just the immediate consequences of shooting a gun into a person.
To a rational person, the immediate consequences would be serious, I mean, if you hit them, serious physical injury or death.
Do you believe that Nicole Nachtman knew when she shot that gun to the back of Robert Dean's head, she knew that she would kill him?
I don't, should she have known? Did she know? And I'm only saying this because I don't know that she is, again, you have to remember this is somebody who's panicky. When she does shoot him, she sees he's on the floor, and she even considers for a minute when, I don't know if he's making noise or what he's doing, but she's even considering he's faking. So again, it leaves you with that question. It's almost like, again, a child.
Well, she knew that she could put the gun to her head and kill herself. She knew that when she shoots a projectile, she could kill someone, correct?
I would say yes, in that sense.
Okay, so, in shooting a gun, you know that you can kill someone. Those are the direct consequences of shooting a gun at a person. Would you not agree? Direct consequences. We can sit here and discuss consequences beyond all the way till the moon. But the direct consequences of that action of pulling the gun is to kill someone, correct?
If you're saying direct to a rational person, yes, it would be to cause serious injury or death. I'm answering your question.
Okay, I'm not saying rational. Did she know that when she shot him, she was going to kill him? That he would die? Or most likely die? She's a Florida State student. She watches horror movies. She's familiar with guns.
Objection to the form of the question. He asked the question and didn't let her answer.
Did she not know that in shooting this man, she would hurt him or kill him?
In some respects, it's hard to know what her thinking is. If you're saying natural consequences, I think you said are direct, the answer you would think would be yes, she's panicked and she shoots him. So exactly what's going on in her mind, I don't know. But that's why that's the only reason that I'm hesitating there.
All right. Well, doctor, you said all along that in her mind she had three choices.
I said three outcomes, and I did find it for you. Now,
Okay.
I hope I didn't
All right,
lose
three
it
outcomes. Three outcomes, man. That's fine. Either
again.
way.
It's on page 239, and that's when I corrected myself.
Okay.
So I just want to make that distinction. It's not like she's sitting there and going, well, I could do this, and deliberating and going, or I could do this. It's sort of like she's aware of it, and you've got to remember she's in a when I say hyper-aroused state, she's panicked, she's terrified, she can't figure this out, and you can't separate that from the mental illness.
All right, doctor. So, going back to the original question, and speaking, and having heard your options, or what did you call it? The
Outcomes.
She knew that one of the outcomes was killing her mother.
That could occur, yes.
Okay. And that's why she had the gun.
Well, I can tell you what she told me. She told me she had the gun because she was afraid her mother would kill her. She took the gun so her mother could not use it against her, and she jumped or went out of the window and ran into her mother.
So again, my original question. Did she know when she shot a person that she could kill a person? Simple. You take a gun, you shoot someone, you can kill that person. Would you not agree that she did know that? Simple fact. I mean, just by the fact you said she's of average intelligence, she would know the purpose of a gun and what it can be used for, correct?
You're saying based on intelligence, yes, of course you would know that.
I'm going to have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
I have no further questions.
Redirect.
Mr. Terry just asked you questions about whether there were any witnesses to the physical abuse that Nicole reported. Do you recall that question?
I do.
And in typical battered child cases or abuse cases, do abusers typically batter their victims in front of a room full of people?
Not typically. I mean, on occasion it happens with other family members if they're present in the home, but nobody was present in this
And
home.
after Nicole was about 3, isn't it in fact true Joey, Kevin, everybody's out of the home by that point?
Clearly Joey's out of the home.
Do you
I
recall
think-
what year Kevin passed away?
It was, just give me a minute, it was, it was around 2004, but I believe he lived with the father, who's a different father, that's Joseph's father, Mr. Carey. I could be wrong there, but I think he did live for a period with Mr. Carey.
Mr. Terry asked you whether this was the most severe case of physical abuse that you had ever seen, and you indicated that most cases you worked
Yes, Your
on,
Honor, that's not the question.
that this was
Well,
not.
I will instruct the jury to rely on their own recollection. Rephrase.
Mr. Terry was referencing that this case was not one of the most severe cases of abuse that you'd ever seen. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you in fact
Of
documented,
physical abuse, yes.
and you in fact documented that that was in fact true previously, correct?
Yes, it's in my report.
However, in your 30 plus years as a college professor, have you ever seen anyone so impaired at the age of Nicole Nachtman at the time of these offenses than you do in this case?
I would be hard pressed to say that I have. And now you have to remember Nicole is not only 21, she's close to 25.
Mr. Terry asked you if anywhere in the jail records, jail medical staff ever diagnosed Nicole with any type of psychotic disorders, and I believe your answer was no.
Not psychosis per se. In the record, there is some reference that she reported when asked the auditory hallucinations, the screaming, and that was on admission. She did report that.
How many total hours did you spend with Nicole Nachtman over the last 4 years evaluating her and doing clinical interviews of her?
It would have been about 35 hours. Now that's over the course of 4 years, or almost 4, 3.5.
And is your diagnosis of schizophrenia, your belief that she was suffering from delusions and that she was psychotic on the date of the offense, all based on you spending those 35 hours with her in addition to the records and the data that you've reviewed in this case?
Yes, and it's also based on, and I want to make this part of the record, a very careful analysis and going back through all those clinical interviews. Because when you give a diagnosis, or a clinician gives a diagnosis of schizophrenia, it's a very serious diagnosis. So it's important to have the data that support it. The psychotic break was always evident to me and I believe to others. But to establish that diagnosis, you need to have evidence of those symptoms, and we talked about that. I went through with the delusions are ongoing, the signs, the referential signs are ongoing, the problems with the disordered thought and speech are ongoing, the problems with the hygiene are ongoing, the problems with forming relationships are ongoing. The test data is showing that she has problems with relationships. So that's all very important, Counselor, Mrs. Hersey.
Mr. Terry also asked you about the tests that you administered to Ms. Nachtman, one being the trauma symptom inventory. And you in fact indicated that that test specifically has validity scores that indicate Ms. Nachtman was not faking when she was responding to those, despite that having been a self-report test.
Yes, and that's very important. Again, that's a very good test, very well respected. So we have 4 indications on that test alone that she was, meaning there are 2 validity scores, faking good, faking bad, on 2 tests, so 2 times 2 equals 4 measures of validity, which would say she's not faking, malingering, lying. She's reporting her symptoms accurately.
Mr. Terry showed you 2 text messages from Miriam Deans indicating that she was possibly putting money at some point in Nicole Nachtman's bank account. Do you recall those text messages he showed you?
Yes.
Does the fact that Miriam Deans was putting money in Nicole's bank account change your opinion as to whether she suffered psychological abuse at the hands of her mother?
No, absolutely not.
Do two text messages indicating that her mother put money in her bank change your opinion as to whether you think she suffers from battered child syndrome?
No, not at all.
And in fact, did you testify earlier today that there's no dispute that Miriam Deans bought things from Nicole, provided shelter, sent her to college, bought her a car, correct? You never disputed that fact.
No, and I would just add that that came up repeatedly in my interviews, that the mom did buy her stuff, but Nicole felt she held it over her, held it against her, and she got to the point she didn't want her mom to buy her stuff anymore.
Does the fact that Miriam Deans was providing food, shelter, and a college education to Nicole Nachtman in any way diminish the abuse she suffered at the hands of her mother?
No, not at all.
Doctor, I want to give you the opportunity to tell the jury at that hearing Mr. Terry asked you about as to what your testimony was with regard to outcomes versus choices. You tried to do that several times, so I want to give you the time to do that.
This is on page, let's see if I just read this, page 239. And Mr. Terry is correct, I did use the word choices. Then I said, this is back 2 paragraphs, probably could say she doesn't see herself as having choices. And so she would say that the killing of her mom just happened. She also said the same thing about Bob. Also said the same thing, I believe, to Dr. Lazaro. Okay, going back to my testimony. So you and I know there were choices. I'm talking to Mr. Terry. So you and I know there were choices, but when you came down to, I guess what I'm saying here, she saw there were 3 outcomes. So she wasn't deliberating well. Here's what I could do. I could, meaning like, in terms of making a conscious decision, but clearly there were 3 outcomes. And that's really what I want to emphasize, that she recognized and believed in.
And is that testimony about outcomes consistent with what you told this jury today?
Absolutely.
With regard to your opinion on consequences, the insanity jury instruction, do you recall how long your testimony was at that hearing we referenced in January of this year with regard to battered child syndrome?
My recollection is it was about 4 hours.
And in those 4 hours, the only 2 questions reference your thoughts on McNaughton or insanity.
Object at this point we approach?
Yeah.
Dr. Heidi, that hearing back in January, you indicated a moment ago, was about 4 hours long?
I think it was at least 4 hours long.
At least your testimony.
I think so.
And you'd agree that the
Yeah, at
focus
least
of,
my testimony, right, because it did go all day.
and you'd agree the focus of that hearing was the battered child syndrome and the history of abuse that Nicole had endured.
That was my understanding.
And the questions that Mr. Terry asked you about McNaughton and the wrongfulness of Ms. Nachtman's actions, as we've noted in his questioning to you, was about 2 questions in that 4-hour hearing.
Yes.
Were you deposed by Mr. Terry in this case?
No, I was not.
And a deposition is an opportunity for lawyers, I'm sure you've been deposed in your history, to ask questions and have experts or people expound on things, and that was not done, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And in fact, you authored a 52-page report in this case dating back to 2018.
That's correct, yes, October 2018.
And again, the report does not address insanity, but the focus of the report was the battered child syndrome and the abuse that Nicole Nachtman endured, correct?
That's absolutely correct, yes.
Can I approach and borrow that jury instruction again?
Sure,
Yes.
if I can find it. I might have misplaced it. Give me just a moment. I'm sorry. It might be right here. I know I read it. Here it is, Mrs. Hersey.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Your opinion as to prong 1 has always been that Nicole Nachtman suffered a mental infirmity, disease, or defect, correct?
Yes, from
And
the
I
very
think
beginning.
the important thing to note about this instruction is the very first sentence. Can you read that for the jury?
Yes, here it is, I'm sorry. A person is considered...
An issue in this case.
Yeah. Oh, okay. An issue in this case is whether Nicole Nachtman was insane when the crime allegedly was committed.
So this instruction specifically deals with at the time of the offense, correct?
Correct. That is that's what I'm reading, yes.
And you have never wavered on number 1.
She has a mental infirmity, disease, or defect. No, I always said that she was severely mentally ill from the beginning.
And so when you go to number 2, when you answered Mr. Terry's question at that hearing about McNaughton, is it fair to say that you were referring to prong B, that Nicole Nachtman knew that murdering somebody was wrong?
Yes. However, Mr. Terry did say he didn't give me the whole instruction, is what I'm saying.
Okay. And so
Of
now,
A.
as you
Yeah.
sit here today after having reviewed this instruction and knowing Nicole Nachtman as you do, having spent over 35 hours with her, have you always believed that she did not understand the consequences of what had occurred in August of 2015 when she killed her mother and her stepfather?
Yes.
I can have a moment?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Heidi.
Free cross?
Thank you, Judge. Dr. Heidi, Ms. Hersey-Folguera just mentioned that I only asked you 2 questions at that hearing regarding insanity, correct?
That's my recollection, Counselor.
Right.
I can go check it. I got it.
But in fact, at that time, on January of 2019, insanity was not even an issue in this case. Would you agree with that?
I would agree that at least as far as that hearing that we were focusing
So
on.
the fact that I only asked you 2 questions would make sense when insanity was not even an issue in the case at that time, correct?
I don't know that I could determine that.
All right.
That sounds more like a legal question to me.
All right, thank you, Doctor.
Any direct?
No, sir.
All right, may this witness be excused?
Yes.
And by the state?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. May we step down to be excused as a witness?
Thank you.
Oh, she had a box. Yeah, you can come
Yeah,
on
I got
down,
a lot of
absolutely, and help her
stuff. Thank you.
carry her stuff.
Okay. Thank you, Judge.
Judge, do we, I don't know if you take a brief recess.
Do you need a brief recess?
No.
All right.
Took me a minute to clear out of my stuff.
As soon as we clear the witness stand, I'll allow you to call your next witness. It's all right. Don't. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to stand up and take a stretch break while they're doing that, you're absolutely welcome to do that.
Thank you very much, Judge.
Watch your step on the way out.
Thank you.
All right, I believe the defense is ready with their next witness. I know it wasn't much of a stretch break and it wasn't a break where you get to go back into the jury room, but we're going to try to keep moving. Unless somebody, if you raise your hand because you absolutely need a break to go out of the courtroom, don't be shy, let me know. All right, I'll ask the defense to call your next witness.
The defense calls Dr. Charles Ewing.
Dr. Ewing, if you'll come forward to be sworn, sir, wherever you're comfortable, if you'll raise your right hand, thank you. Do you swear affirm any testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you, doctor. If you'll follow the bailiff around the ramp that leads up to the witness chair, please watch your step. When you get to the chair, go ahead and have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. That microphone is adjustable. It looks like it got moved up. You might need to bring it down, and if you've got any stuff you need to unpack, you're welcome to do so.
Does the chair adjust?
The chair does adjust, but I don't know exactly which lever it is.
Okay, thank you.
I've seen other witnesses figure it out, though.
Can you introduce yourself to the jury, please?
I'm Charles Patrick Ewing.
Doctor, let me have you bring that microphone down because some of the jury do have
sorry.
sometimes it's not amplified.
My name is Charles Patrick Ewing.
Tell me what you do for a living.
I'm a forensic psychologist.
Tell me what a forensic psychologist is.
I evaluate individuals who are involved in primarily criminal litigation, but some civil litigation. In civil litigation, mostly involved with evaluating plaintiffs who claim that they've been injured. And in criminal cases, I'm involved in evaluating criminal defendants. My practice has gone on for 30, 40 years. Most recently, most of the work that I do is court-appointed work. I evaluate competency for the courts in, I'm not sure what judicial district it is, but it's Collier County, Lee County, Henry County.
Kind of down in South Florida.
Yes.
Can you tell the jury your educational background in psychology?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology from Syracuse University and a doctoral degree from Cornell University.
In what year did you receive those degrees?
1971 and 1975.
Do you also happen to have a law degree?
I do. Yes.
And where did you get a law degree from?
I graduated from Harvard Law School in 1983.
And what was your purpose for going to law school? Just you're obviously you're get your psychology degree. What was the added degree in law school for?
Well, I'd been a psychologist for a while, and I was a clinical psychologist. I worked in a hospital, worked in the emergency room, and I was the director of a children's program in the hospital, mental health center. I got involved in a lot of child abuse cases, mostly not as an expert initially, just as a reporter, mandated reporter. I saw a lot of child abuse, reported it, and ended up testifying, and then was at one point called on as an expert witness to testify in a child abuse case. I testified for the state, and after that I got more and more calls to testify in court, and I asked attorneys, asked the judges about going to law school and what they thought about it, and they all told me not to do it. And so I did it. But seriously, I thought that I wanted to pursue a career as a forensic psychologist and do more work in the courts. And since then, I've been a forensic psychologist since 1983, and also since 1983 I've been a professor.
Now, is it fair to say that despite getting the law degree, I guess to kind of educate yourself in forensics, your primary focus or practice has been in the area of psychology?
Yes, yeah, I haven't done much in the way of legal practice. I did a little bit early on, and also at the end of law school I had the opportunity to do some prosecutorial work, but I haven't really practiced law. I am admitted to the bar in New York State.
And the forensic psychologist you said you became in 1983, is that correct?
I would say, yeah, that's when I graduated from law school. That's when I would say from then on pretty much all the work that I've done as a psychologist has been forensic psychology.
Now, as it relates to the areas of child abuse or battered child syndrome specifically, you had indicated you treated patients and worked in a hospital and dealt with victims of child abuse, which is kind of what piqued your interest. Can
Yes.
you tell the jury about any publications, literature that you yourself have authored or been a part of in those specific areas pertaining to child abuse or battered child syndrome?
Well, I've published 11 books and 60 to 70 articles and papers. I think probably a third of those deal in some manner with child abuse, child neglect, intrafamilial violence. Two of the books, well, three of the books deal specifically with one is called Kids Who Kill, one is called When Children Kill, and the third one is called Fatal Families, which deals with all kinds of homicides within families. Adults who kill children, children who kill adults, adult children who kill their parents, sort of runs the gamut.
And as far as those publications, the books, the articles you wrote, all dealing with the topics that you just mentioned, are those all, I guess, recognized within your field?
Yeah, I would say a number of my books have been published by Oxford University Press, and others have been, well, they've sold well. I don't know if that counts. People in the field have read them. They've been well reviewed and cited.
With regard to your practice, do you practice in other jurisdictions besides Florida?
Yes, I'm licensed in New York and Florida, and I've testified in about a dozen other states, and I've done work in maybe half a dozen other states where I did not testify but did forensic practice.
If you know, about how many times do you believe you've testified in your career in the area of psychology, child abuse, and or kids who kill parents?
Oh, about those issues in particular, I'd say maybe 50 times.
Throughout the country?
Yes.
Judge, at this time, if the state has any questions, Dr. Ewing.
No questions.
You may proceed.
Dr. Ewing, when were you retained in this case?
I believe it was sometime last year or early this year. I don't remember the exact date.
And what materials, and again, generally, were you provided and did you review in preparation for your work in this case?
Yeah, I have a list. The defendant's jail records, the child abuse allegations from when she was young, Florida Department of Children and Family records, again, when she was young. There was a big chunk of material that was labeled discovery, which included police reports and other items related to the homicides. Then there was a Texas family court file dealing with custody and visitation litigation. I saw, I don't know if it was complete, I don't think complete, but I saw a number of Nicole Nachtman's educational records. I saw a visitation this is a video of a visitation Nicole Nachtman had with her brother, video visitation after she was arrested and incarcerated. I saw the depositions of Angelica Henwood, David Lair, Eric Lair, George Lair, Hunter Lair, Jackie Roman, Laura Hessemer, and Joseph Carey. I reviewed videotapes of Dr. Lazaru's evaluation of the defendant. I reviewed a video of the defendant while she was in custody of the police, a video of a visitation she had, I may have already said this, on 9/8/15, that was with her brother, video of the defendant's visitations with her father, and you asked me what I used for my opinion, or
No, just what you reviewed. First materials.
Okay, those are the materials that I reviewed. After I gave you my opinion, I reviewed a 52-page report by Dr. Heidi.
Okay, so just so we're clear, the initial discovery materials or case materials you reviewed, and then interviewed Nicole Nachtman. You formulated your opinion as it relates to that, and then later were provided Dr. Heidi's report, Dr.
Yes.
Lazaro's deposition, evaluations from all the doctors involved after you had rendered your opinion.
Well, there was a deposition of Dr. Lazaro. I don't believe there was a deposition from Dr. Heidi.
Correct, just her report.
Just her report.
When did you evaluate Nicole face-to-face, and if you can explain to the jury what you do when you have a mental status examination like you?
Yeah, I saw her on April 8th of this year. What I did was to take a detailed family, psychosocial, educational, occupational history from her mental health history, and I did a fairly standard mental status examination to determine what, if any, mental illnesses she was suffering, what, if any, symptoms she had experienced. And then I specifically questioned her at length about the events leading up to the homicides in this case and her state of mind at the time of both homicides.
Now, in the materials that you mentioned you reviewed, what impressions did you have from Nicole's childhood records, the family court file, the custody battle, and things like that that would be relevant to your opinion today?
Well, she got off to a rocky start. Her parents, almost from the get-go, were litigating over custody, over visitation. One parent said the other parent sexually abused her. The other parent said, no, you sexually abused her. They were battling in court. There were just hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents, complaints on either side, court documents, or court orders, temporary court orders. There was a lot of litigation. It was clear that she, at least for the earliest years of her life, there was a lot of family turmoil and aggression, not physical aggression, but well, there was some between the parents, but not toward her. But there was a lot of turmoil, and I would say verbal aggression going on.
Why is that of significance in a case where there may be allegations of child abuse?
Well, because you're talking about...
In the early years, why is that so significant?
Well, it was significant to me because there are allegations...
Wait, time, hold it.
I'm sorry.
Do you want to break, go to the restroom?
All right, I need a restroom break, so we will absolutely take a short break. Do not discuss the case amongst yourselves with anyone else. Do not do any research related to the case, and avoid any exposure to any reports of the case outside the courtroom. We'll just take a very short break until anybody who needs to send you all back there. Anybody who needs to use the restroom, use the restroom. We'll bring you back. All rise for the jury. Jury's exited. Everyone may be seated. Doctor, it's going to be a short break. You can step down if you want. If you want to use the restroom or anything, you're welcome to sit there.
I'm good. I'll just
if
relax.
you like. Yeah. If you're comfortable there, you can stay there. We're still 5:45?
Let me ask Dr. Ewing about what's the situation. I'll talk to Ms. Nachtman and get it confirmed. We believe at this point the alternate needs to be put in her place.
Okay.
We agree.
Yeah,
Because
I think,
Friday at noon is, and she didn't tell us. This would have been
Right,
different
no,
if
I
we had
agree, but we'll
said
pull
something.
her, we'll talk to her, because maybe she has some flexibility, maybe she's changed things, but if not, and she is of the opinion she's gotta be out of here at 12, I agree with you, because we don't want a jury deliberation going over and then a concern, and now we've released alternates and they've been deliberating.
Correct, so we
we
agree that
agree
the
on
alternate
that.
is in her place if she still has that obligation.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna wait till tomorrow, though, to inquire with
Yes,
her.
thank you.
All right.
We just wanted to remind the court that she didn't bring that up.
Oh, I know. No, I think I was the first one to say that when I brought that up.
No, and our client, I've already spoken to our client, she realizes that we need to make that replacement.
Well, maybe, we'll see.
Did you bring clothes and stuff
Ready
to
to?
stay over?
Yes, we're
I
ready.
got a
Bring
little
them in.
bit in my car, my emergency stash.
Let's bring them in.
All rise. Jury entering.
All members of the jury are present and seated. Everyone else may be seated at this time. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, welcome back. First question to you is, did anybody have any exposure to the case, discuss the case, or do any research to the case during that last short break? All right, let the record reflect no hands are raised. I'm sure you all are always wondering, how long is this judge going to keep me here today? I just want to let you all rest at ease that we are only going to go up till 5:30. We're going to release you at 5:30 today, and we'll come back and pick up. We're not going to finish this witness. We'll come back and finish this witness tomorrow morning. But we're going to pick up where we left off with the direct examination.
Thank you, Judge. Dr. Ewing, I think you had just indicated or explained kind of what a mental status examination is, and that's in fact what you did with Nicole in April.
Yes.
I believe I had also asked you about the records that you reviewed with regard to the family court file, the custody file, and kind of what your overall impressions about Nicole's early years in that battle were, and I believe you gave us that opinion.
Yes.
Was there anything additional that we didn't cover? Specifically, I want to talk about a psychological evaluation that a Dr. Anderson had done within that file. Without telling us the exact contents of the evaluation or what may have been said, can you tell me just what your overall court file?
Yeah, Dr.
From the family court file.
Yeah, Dr. Anderson did a court-ordered evaluation of Nicole and her parents and reported to the court a lengthy report. But the bottom line was that she was extremely concerned about the psychological consequences for Nicole Nachtman if her parents continued to behave the way they had been behaving toward each other.
Did the evaluation record how old Nicole was at the time of that evaluation took place?
I think she was about 3 years old, maybe 4, but 3 or 4.
What is your understanding from your review of the custody file and the family court file and all the records as to when you believe Nicole Nachtman last had contact with her biological father, or at what age the family court file kind of resolved and Miriam Dean obtained custody?
Well, her father, my understanding is her father had custody of her early on, and that he was raising her for the first year or so or more of her life, and that during this custody litigation, her mother secured custody, so it would have been preschool age, and the father had, my understanding is that he had visitation, but that the mother thwarted, at least he claimed that she thwarted the visitation. She claimed he didn't show up. There were more battles, more custody and visitation battles, and at some point he was just gone from the scene.
And you believe that was again around that preschool age, 3 or so?
Maybe 4 years, yeah, around there somewhere.
I had asked you, and I don't know if we got to that because I know we just went on a break, but I had asked you about what that type of turmoil in someone like Nicole's life at such a young age what type of impact that can have?
Well,
on a child?
it varies. My belief is that it had a tremendous impact on her development.
And tell me why that is.
Well, because I don't want to jump the gun too far, but I agree with Dr. Heidi that Nicole suffers from schizophrenia. And schizophrenia, we know from years of study that it has both a biological and a psychosocial basis. The biological basis, in order to become schizophrenic, you have to have some genetic biological predisposition toward it. We also know that most people, well, I can't say most, many people who have that predisposition never develop full-blown schizophrenia. Unfortunately, in this case, that was only the beginning of what would become pretty much a lifetime of abuse for this young woman. And it's my belief that psychological abuse started early on, preschool, continued right up until around the time of these unfortunate killings, and those two factors, this underlying biological factor plus the stress of being in an abusive, dysfunctional family all those years, is what caused her to be so severely mentally ill.
Did the bonding break from her biological father, Ronald, in her early childhood years have any effect on her?
I think it did. I can't say for absolute certainty, but seeing the two of them interact together more recently.
And you're referring to jail visits of
Yes.
videos that you
Right.
observed?
Yeah, it seemed to me that they had a strong bond at one time in childhood, and that seemed to be reflected in the records too. The family court records indicated that both of these parents had a loving, caring relationship with their daughter. And his relationship with the daughter was, whether it was his fault or the court's fault or mom's fault, for some reason it was just cut off for many, many, many years.
And in fact, is it your understanding that Mr. Nachtman did not reunite, for lack of a better term, with Nicole until after her arrest for this case?
That's right. That's my understanding.
Did you also have an opportunity to review school records?
Yes.
What did the records reflect that you reviewed as to how many schools Nicole attended in her childhood?
It's got to be at least 9, and I want to say maybe even a dozen. I can't remember, but it's somewhere in that vicinity.
9 to 12.
Yes.
How does that type of instability in moving schools, if you go to school from age 5 to 18, because you graduate, that's 13 years. If in fact it's 9 or it's 12, how does that instability affect a child's development or a child's ability to make meaningful relationships and connections with
Well,
people?
obviously it makes it extremely difficult to have any kind of extended peer relationships. But some kids can deal with that. I've seen a number of, quote, Army brats, for example, who have moved over the course of their lifetime, attended many schools. Sometimes they can deal with that, but not somebody who's in an abusive, tumultuous situation like this young woman was experiencing throughout her life.
Was Nicole, like you termed it, a typical Army brat who could deal, or in your opinion, based on your review of the records, did that instability and constant movement between schools affect Nicole?
Oh yeah, and I discussed it with her at some length, and it did, it clearly did. It made it almost impossible for her to have any kind of meaningful peer relations. Not that she necessarily would have anyway, because she had serious problems from at least 3rd grade on relating to other students in school. So I can't blame it all on those moves, but clearly the moves didn't help. They made it much more difficult for her.
Was there anything within the school records, specifically because you mentioned the 3rd grade, that you relied on with regard to observations teachers or school psychologists may have made of Nicole in the 3rd grade?
Yeah, there was an evaluation, a psychological evaluation done of Nicole when she was in the 3rd grade, because the teachers were saying that she was depressed, aggressive, angry, poor peer relations, difficulty getting along, having academic problems, that sort of thing. And I made some notes on it if I could refer to those.
Yeah, that'll refresh your memory.
Yeah. The psychologist said that she thought she might have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and that I believe she recommended some treatment for her.
Is that 3rd grade evaluation or the psychological evaluation significant to you in terms of the onset of Nicole's mental illness?
Yes.
Tell me what's significant about that.
What I've seen over the course of my work and what's documented in the literature is that when we look back on a patient's development, a particular patient who suffers from schizophrenia or some other major mental illness, there are usually signs dating back into early childhood. They may not have been picked up, they may not have been recognized at the time, but in retrospect we can look back and you can almost always see that there were signs that this person was different, was peculiar, was acting out, had some kind of problems. And 3rd grade seems about right, in my experience, for people to start noticing those sorts of things. Kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, there's not so much of an emphasis put on behavior and there's not so much emphasis placed on behavior like this. But once you start getting into more academic issues, more serious educational issues, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, then you start to see these kind of referrals made and evaluations done. That's been my experience.
You had mentioned that within those school records for Nicole that you observed that there had been a recommendation that some follow-up treatment or therapy or something be done.
Yes.
In any of the records you reviewed, the family accounts, the custody battle file, anything indicate that Nicole Nachtman or Miriam Deans ever followed up with that recommendation by the school?
No, to my knowledge, they didn't.
Did you also have an opportunity to review school records where Nicole spent some time at a boarding school called the Air Academy?
Yes.
What, if any, indication in those school records did you see with regard to teacher observations or reports about Nicole's behaviors or bullying or anything like that?
Well, they reported that she was a victim of bullying, that she showed odd behavior and students picked on her, and she responded by withdrawing, but also by making threats to other students. And there was quite a bit of concern. And from what I could gather, the school pretty much demanded that she have some kind of evaluation and treatment. And I don't recall it. I heard Dr. Heidi testify that she got some kind of evaluation done. I don't recall that, but I know she didn't get any treatment.
That was going to be my next question. Did you review in any of the records, despite teacher concerns while Nicole was attending the Air Academy, or reports about bullying, or maybe even her response to the bullying, that in fact any follow-up counseling or treatment was obtained by her mother or any guardian for that matter?
No, there wasn't.
And just so the jury can understand a time frame, we talked about the 3rd grade school psychological evaluation. What age or grades do you believe Nicole was attending the Air Academy, if you remember?
I think it was 7th and 8th or 8th and 9th, somewhere in that vicinity.
7th or 8th grade, a child is usually about how old? We can put an age on it.
13, 14. Early adolescence.
You had indicated that you also, in the materials you reviewed, in addition to the school records, the psychological evaluations, you reviewed deposition testimony or recollection and recitations of family history from family members, like the Uncle Eric Lear, George Lear, these people who were kind of around Nicole for part of her childhood. Did you review
Yes.
those materials?
Yes.
And what was your overall impression from those materials as to whether any family members were reporting seeing signs of an onset of a possible mental illness or issues Nicola may have been having? Even her brother Joey Carey. Anything about those materials that you reviewed to indicate not only is the school reporting issues, but so is the family, or at least noticing the family?
Well, yeah, her brother seemed to view it as somewhere in the middle of her childhood that she just changed, that she went from being an outgoing, charming, wonderful kid to kind of withdrawn, depressed, and difficult child, difficult to relate to. So that's one thing. 2 or 3 of her family members mentioned over time that she was withdrawn, that in fact one of them talked about her appearing to talk to herself, and I believe another spoke about how, I think it was her cousin, somebody about maybe her age or maybe a little bit older, trying to think of what his name was. The young man.
David Lear, does that sound right?
Yeah, I think that's right. That she changed, that they used to do things together and I guess play together, and that changed, and that she became increasingly distant and difficult. And
I apologize, it may have been Hunter Lear.
Oh.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's right. I'm
That
sorry.
would have been Eric's son.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So that's her cousin, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, with regard to the reports by the relatives or the family members who observed, again, these changes in Nicole issues, did the records reflect, A, that they appeared to have reported their concerns to Miriam Deans, the mother, at all?
I don't think they did. I mean, they may have discussed it at some level, but
Or that any follow-up treatment or counseling or interventions were done at that point?
no, nothing was done.
So you have from the school records, counselors and teachers reporting observations about Nicole
Yes,
that are somewhat concerning or
I would say very concerning, especially the ones from the Air Academy.
and then reports from her own family members that possibly they're observing some changes in Nicole, and nothing in you reviewed that there were ever any counseling or interventions done by the mother.
That's right.
What, if any, evidence did you see both in the records, family accounts, and your evaluation of Nicole to indicate that there was evidence that she was physically abused? And I'm going to break them up individually, but let's start with physical abuse.
Nicole indicated to me that on several different occasions her mother punched her, slapped her, kicked her, stomped her, and pinched her, grabbed her, pulled her hair. I think those are the main things that she described.
Anything within the records, were there like police reports or arrest reports on behalf of Nicole listed as a victim anywhere, anything like that in any of the
I
records?
didn't see anything like
Okay.
that.
So the physical abuse would be things Nicole reported to you.
Yes.
What about the psychological abuse?
Well, what she reported was a long history of her mother yelling, swearing, condemning, demeaning, swearing at her, calling her names, vulgar names, and extreme amount of control. demanding, for example, that she lose a certain amount of weight, telling her that she was fat, that she was ugly, that her clothing was ugly, putting her down at really kind of critical points like high school graduation, which is was a big deal. And I guess it's a big deal to anyone. It was a big deal to me to graduate from high school.
What did Nicole report occurred at graduation in terms of physical, I'm sorry, psychological abuse?
Yeah, that her mother told her that she was ashamed of her, basically, and that she hadn't lived up to her expectations, and that she didn't like the clothing that she was wearing, that she didn't appear appropriately dressed for the graduation.
In addition to Nicole's reports of psychological abuse, did you view anywhere in the records where that would have been corroborated by either other members of the family or anyone else that as far as documents you reviewed?
Her brother talked a bit about it. He said he'd never seen any physical abuse, but he did talk about how his sister Nicole had a difficult relationship with the mom, and I think he talked about controlling issues, and he also talked about some abuse that he'd suffered at the hands of the mom, Mrs. Deans.
Judgment approach? Yes.
Take it up to 5:30.
With regard to the psychological abuse that you've just testified to was not only documented by her brother Joseph, but also Nicole relaying that information to you.
And some records. I mean, for example, there are records, medical records, about the LASIK surgery and I think about liposuction.
Why are those significant, or what about those constitute a form of abuse in your opinion?
Well, the mother is basically unhappy with the way the child looks. So she wants the child to undergo what some people would regard as significant surgery, liposuction, in order to make her look more like she wants her to look. I consider that to be psychologically abusive, especially when the child doesn't want it. Same thing with the LASIK surgery. The mom wanted the daughter to have LASIK surgery. The daughter didn't want it. She was afraid of the surgery. Mother insisted. They got there. The records indicate that Nicole was interviewed by some staff member, a nurse, or some other person, and she raised concerns about it, and then it was discussed, and it did not occur.
And the LASIK was more of an appearance thing, was your understanding,
Again,
so
yeah.
she didn't have to wear glasses?
Yeah, mother didn't like the way she looked with glasses. But all that's kind of part of a control that I would see as psychologically abusive.
Any other instances of psychological abuse that you can recall that either Nicole reported to you, family members reported, or that you reviewed within the records?
Well, I mean, there are multiple occasions where the mother swore at her, called her names, called her fucking bitch, motherfucker. I mean, those seem to be two of the pet names that she would frequently use. There's also an incident where I believe the mother was engaging what I would consider to be gaslighting, which is maybe trying to make you feel like you're a little crazy. Nicole was on the telephone with her, and her stepfather was supposed to be coming to pick her up at school, and the mother didn't say anything to her. She was talking to her as if she were at home, and then she pulls up, the mother pulls up.
So the mother had lied to Nicole and said your stepdad was coming,
Right.
which would have been Bob.
Yes.
But in fact, the mom shows up.
And then and played it out right to the bitter end, till shortly before she got there.
And why is that significant to you?
Well, because as I said, I see it as kind of gaslighting. It's like Nicole is very rigid in her thinking. You tell her something, and that's the way it is. And her mother told her, Bob is coming to pick you up. Bob's coming to pick you up. And so when her mother shows up after having just spoken to her and saying, Bob's coming to get you, she was surprised, and it kind of knocked her off her game, so to speak.
Let me ask you a question, because we're on the topic of abuse, both physical, psychological, in this example you just raised. You indicated earlier that you also watched the video evaluations by the state's doctor, Dr. Emily Lazaro. Is that
Yes.
correct? And in fact, those were videotaped, and the entire evaluation was videotaped.
Yes, it was.
Did Nicole report that same incident about the Bob, if you remember, to Dr. Lazaro?
I don't remember
Okay.
if she reported many other instances of psychological abuse to Dr. Lazaro.
When she reported the instances of psychological abuse, physical abuse to Dr. Lazaro in those video evaluations, what do you recall Nicole's demeanor, reaction to describing those events as she's talking about them?
She was just acting as if it was happening right there. I mean, she was crying, sobbing, moaning, curling up, rocking. It was a very emotional reaction. And very current, I would say, almost present. It looked to me almost like she was reliving those moments.
And when you watch the video evaluations by the state doctor, those occurred this year in 2019.
Yes.
And the reports of abuse, both psychological, physical, or just in general, the treatment of her mother, she's recalling things from her childhood, correct?
Yeah, as early as the 3rd grade.
But as she's describing them in 2019, she is still having an emotional reaction to those events.
Yeah, in fact, in one case, she's saying sorry, 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 as if she's apologizing
To the doctor,
to her mother.
to her mother.
Yeah, that's how I took it.
Judge, it's 5:30. I don't know.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to break for today. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to send you home now at 5:30. We'll pick up at 9 a.m. Please do not do any research related to the case. Please do not talk about the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. And please avoid any exposure to the case from media reports of the case. All rise for the jury. Jury has exited. Everyone may be seated. Doctor, you may step down.
Okay.
Sorry about that, but to the extent that you need me to, I'm ordering you to be back here tomorrow
Thank you.
a little bit before 9 a.m.
That's helpful to me.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Not a problem. People don't usually like me to order them to do things.
Judge, before we leave for the day, I want to bring up an issue that just came up with Ms. Hersey at the bench.
Oh, Doctor, I'm sure you know, but please do not discuss your testimony with anyone unless all the attorneys are present. Thank you.
And Judge, that has to do with the suppression of her tossing the gun.
do my own research, but that's not my understanding of the law. But if he has case law on that point.
Well, I'm not gonna make a decision now. We know it's a legal issue. I'll ask you to look for some case law that supports, even if it's by way of analogy.
Okay, Judge, because I was going to say, this is kind of a unique issue where I don't know where I'm going to find where something was suppressing
look,
as to law
Do
enforcement
me a
actions.
favor and look,
I'll
okay?
look, I'll look, yes.
Even if you find something, or get somebody in your office to look,
I will look,
who
Judge,
does
but-
legal research.
But I will also, just common sense tells you that everything else that she's been saying about the murder would have been basically suppressed as well because of Miranda.
I hear you, you have my
So,
attention on that,
right.
but I can't imagine that this issue hasn't come up somewhere.
I don't know, we'll look.
So, see, and I'm gonna ask the defense to look too,
I will.
and obviously if you find anything that supports them, you have an obligation.
Absolutely.
All right. Anything else?
No, sir.
All right, have a nice evening, I'll see you back here. What I suggest we do, I told the jury 9 o'clock, and they usually get here a little bit before bring them up, is probably address that issue, unless you want me to wait. I'm not stuck to anything on how to address that with, I believe it was number 11 we had said.
Number 10?
Oh, I apologize, 10, which is,
Yes.
yes, Ballister. So, yeah, Allison Ballister. She was previously number 66 in the panel. I don't know if you want to start off with that tomorrow, or if you want me to pull her in during the first break or during lunch, but we do need to address that with her at some
I think
point.
we have plenty to do tomorrow, and I would ask that we not bring it up till tomorrow afternoon.
I just don't want somebody not paying attention who now thinks they're the alternate or not
Well,
the
nobody
alternate.
knows. They're
Well,
not
right,
gonna
no,
know
but I
either
mean,
way.
if, you know, we then say she's all of a sudden gone, you know what I mean? When we haven't, I'd wait till we rest the case
Yeah, okay.
and then address it then, that way no one's looking around and saying, why are we
Yeah.
missing a juror?
No, absolutely.
How can I get out too?
Absolutely, absolutely.
The other question I have is, I know we're not good with time, but are we gonna get to closings tomorrow afternoon, in your opinion, so that I know what to work on? I mean,
I
is
mean,
that?
I hope, I'm hoping that that's a possibility.
Okay. That's what I wanted to make sure.
All right.
That Dr. Lazaro is not gonna be like 5 hours.
Dr. Lazare, I don't take near as long, and I'm not going to, I do not,
There's only one fast person in here, and she says it's her.
well, she is faster than me probably, but I judge, to just so the court's aware, I'm not gonna really spend a lot of time on the mental health stuff, because, I mean, we're gonna,
She's not mentally.
Okay, well,
we're spending
So you're agreeing
our issues
that
on more of the other side, so I think my directive, Dr. Lazare, might be like an hour and a half, something like that.
optimistically we might get to closings and get them out deliberating. Now, what I usually do is I, bring them in at 6 o'clock maybe and say, do you all want to keep going, or do you want to go home and come back tomorrow? So we can perhaps get them out deliberating tomorrow before 5 o'clock and then give them an option.
Okay.
We
Yes.
just need to deal with something between the parties.
Do you need me to?
No.
Okay, all right. I always appreciate when you all deal and resolve things between the parties. Have a nice evening. All right, thank you.
If we call David Lair as to that picture, do you intend to recall it? It's just David Lair on pictures.
Okay.
If we call Joey Carey,
Do you and you're gonna recall her?
or will be like, we'll be in rebuttal probably 10 of you.
That's why I was, okay, that's what I was.
You know what Joey said?
Sure, right, I understand that, that's what I was trying to. Okay, you and I, that's fine.
Yeah, just let us know when you
No,
know
of
in the
course, I
morning so we
totally
can have our
understand.
witnesses here.
Totally got it.
Thanks.
If you do, and we do it all the time. If you